Welcome, survivors. Today we discuss The Walking Dead Onslaught. This is a VR first-person zombie survival shooter with an official AMC The Walking Dead license, developed and published by Survios, a company with actually quite an impressive backlog of VR games. This one, however, did not land so well. After an initial terrible reception, the reviews have gotten a little better a year after release, so let us have a more detailed look at how the game works, where the problems are, and if the negative reviews are deserved. The main gameplay loop looks like this. You embark on supply run missions to scavenge materials that you use to construct and upgrade buildings or improve your arsenal. The buildings increase your stats or let you gather materials more efficiently. For a supply run you choose to play as Rick, Michonne, Carol, or after the campaign is completed, Daryl. You gotta choose carefully. You do not want to wander into a zombie apocalypse with inappropriate footwear. Seriously though, the choice of character has no impact on gameplay whatsoever. It just changes up some voice lines and the character model, which you don't see anyways because it's a first person game. A little bit of a missed opportunity here to add character specific skills or attributes. As you progress through the game, more supply run nodes get unlocked. It is pretty much always the same thing, namely a couple of street sections where you gather stuff while outrunning the horde, which is basically a Fortnite BR wall closing in on you. After the street section you usually reach an army camp where you have to hold out for a certain amount of time while grabbing everything you can get your hands on, with an increasing number of zombies stumbling into the area. In both modes you are on a clock and the task is to grab as much stuff as possible in a limited time frame. Interactables are clearly marked, which facilitates a high-paced gameplay. For the time-limited supply run modes, this worked just fine. There's very little variation in these missions. They all use the same assets, you just sometimes walk down the street, sometimes you walk through the backyards. I found this to be disappointing. There would have been a possibility to explore different areas of town, from the suburbs, the commercial and industrial districts, city centers, parks, a harbor maybe. Well, to be fair, there's like a downtown and a more suburban asset set, but they pretty much blend together, probably because the visual style is so forgettable. Between supply runs you will unlock chapters of the campaign. I don't feel like a spoiler warning is necessary because there's not much story to spoil to begin with. In the campaign you play as Daryl, who is searching for some unknown girl, and well, that is basically it. During the whole thing, Survios tried to create some sense of tension between Daryl and Rick, but the writing did not manage to give a reason for that, so it feels like they are just bickering all the time over nothing, like an old married couple. It's bad. There's also no conclusion to the story, instead it just ends. It feels like they were planning to do 10 chapters, but after the 7th they were just like, nah, I don't want to do another chapter. This will have to do. And honestly, I can't blame them. Maybe they were just having pity on the players and did not want them to suffer through more of this. Or maybe they just had a fixed release date and did not have the time and resources to complete the story. Who knows? They went out of their way to avoid rendering human mobs or NPC in the campaign. The human villains are all conveniently turned just before you arrive, and when it comes to NPC, well, you literally talk to a house.
I can't trust you. Not unless you help me first.
Hell no. After all that, you want a favor?
You could clearly take care of yourself. I lost someone, and I need to find them.
I'm listening.
At least the voice acting is good. For Daryl, Eugene and Carol, they had the actors from the show at their disposal, so that is cool. The voice actor for Rick is overselling a little bit, but I'm fine with that. It adds to the comedic quality of the game.
Good find. We can always use more meds.
In contrast to the supply run, the campaign lets you explore the areas at your own pace, and it gives a bit more variety in surroundings, both of which I appreciated. The main problem for me was that the design of the game world is centered around the fast-paced supply run section of the game and does not really work that well for the campaign. The very limited interaction that the environment allows makes the mode feel gamey, while I think an experience more centered around immersion would have been a better fit. On the other hand, that would have taken more resources, both in development and computational resources for the player. It may have been a better approach to fully commit and go arcade, with time trials and leaderboards, instead of creating a linear, story-based single-player experience. That would also have put them at a more comfortable distance to the most direct competitor, Saints and Sinners. So now it's time to get to the fun stuff. Let's talk about weapons and combat. Let's talk about killing zombies. That's what it's all about, right? While doing supply runs and in some campaign missions, you unlock weapons for your armory. There's a whole bunch of melee and ranged weapons, and each has individual upgrades you can purchase with the supplies you scavenged on previous runs. Carry more ammo for the revolver to maintain dominance. Obvious choice. Worth it. The guns have a semi-manual reload mechanic. When you empty or eject your magazine, you can get a new one by moving your offhand down to belt level. You will have your hands there probably anyway, so usually the magazine just appears in your hand. Again, this is a system that works just fine for the fast-paced supply run mode. For an immersive story experience, I would have appreciated a more manual mechanic. You can grab enemies by the neck to keep them at a distance. I found the grabbing mechanic to be somewhat unreliable. Too often it just did not work, and that can absolutely kill you. Maybe my timing was off. All zombies have the same attack animation, the Spite, which will hurt you even when they are at a distance. Sometimes they start their attack animation when they are way off, which looks hilarious. There's a dismemberment mechanic, which is cool and all. Unfortunately, it has no impact on gameplay. Zombies won't act any different or become less dangerous when you chop off an arm, so there's no real reason to interact with the system, except for the fun of it. The feedback when getting hit is a bit light. Oftentimes I would not even realize that I am being gnawed on from behind. I guess that being bitten by a zombie is something you would not miss that easily, so it could be portrayed to the player a bit more palpable. The zombies you encounter are getting harder as you progress, as they get armor which protects them from being grabbed and gives them more health. Apparently wearing a helmet protects the brain even when being stabbed under the visor into the face. Unfortunately, the difficulty scales in a way that, at least on the hard difficulty, ranged weapons become completely useless later in the game, and your trusted knife is your only viable weapon at your disposal.
I started aiming for the head.
Not gonna lie, the machete is also pretty good. There was one post-launch patch that tried to resolve this issue. If you have played the game prior to the patch and are wondering if it is worth it to give it another shot, in my opinion, it is not. The main thing it did was to introduce some kind of cooldown on melee kills. In Saints and Sinners, for example, it takes force to drive your screwdriver into the zombie's head and to get it back out again. In Onslaught, zombie heads are like butter on a hot summer day. So what they did in this patch is that your knife gets stuck in the zombie head after a kill for a second or so before you can pull it out again. That feels pretty bad. After every kill you will instinctively try to pull harder to get your knife out of the zombie head, which just won't work until the cooldown is over. Then you can pull out the knife without any force whatsoever. So the patch did not manage to make ranged combat more viable. It did, however, manage to make the game more difficult, as you are still very much restricted to your stabby melee weapon, but have the time between kills increased by this melee kill cooldown. Now there's a higher chance of being swarmed. I think the weapons did not really need adjustments. The real problem the game has is enemy design. Or to be more specific, the weapon design and enemy design are disconnected from each other. There's no reason to put weapons into your game when there's no use for them. This not only applies to ranged weapons, but also to all the melee weapons that cannot stab enemies. They are cool, but they do not serve a purpose. They do not change the way you approach an encounter. It is okay to have some weapons that are less useful than others, but when the first weapon you get in the game is also the best weapon in the game, and there never is a use for any other weapons, then there's a problem with game design. How could they make this so useless? That being said, what could be done to make this better? I do actually like the weapon design. I do like the look and feel of most of the weapons. So I would overhaul the enemy design to better fit the selection of weapons available. There are some typical zombie archetype present in most zombie survival games. There are bloaters that explode on death, there are screamers that summon more enemies if not disposed of quickly, often there are spitters with some sort of ranged attack. There's a gameplay reason for each of these archetypes. They all need a different approach and type of weapon to deal with. I would not recommend to simply copy enemy design from other games, but it can't hurt to take some inspiration, right? In Onslaught there's only one enemy type, the type that walks towards the player slowly. The one archetype that is most efficiently disposed of with melee weapons. Enemy variety is key to make the combat experience more engaging and allow for a wider range of arsenal to be viable. Here's another suggestion. Human enemies. In the campaign the main villains are actually humans, you just never encounter them. The game could be designed so that ranged weapons are strong against human targets and melee weapons are viable against zombies. That would work. But humans are not only missing in the campaign. I feel that Alexandria is the biggest missed opportunity of the game. It is basically an immersive menu. Your movement is restricted to this little circle around a pile of trash, just enough space to move between the interactable nodes, which you can also shortcut to via the menu button. The firing range is the only thing that has some functionality beyond that. An immersive menu like this is generally not a bad thing, but it could have been so much more. During the course of the game, you apparently rescue a whole lot of survivors that join you in Alexandria. The thing is, you never see them. Imagine you would actually encounter them during the scavenging missions and maybe have to complete a small objective to successfully rescue them, like fending off some zombies or clearing a way out of a building or something like that. And imagine after that, they would actually end up in Alexandria where you can interact with them. Some of them give you tasks to construct buildings in Alexandria via the spillboard. Imagine they would actually inhabit these buildings after you build them and you could walk inside and interact with them. Some give you little tasks to find some items out in the city. Imagine these items were actually rendered in-game and after you procure them, you would see the survivor use them in Alexandria. Most of these suggestions do not affect gameplay that much. They would, however, give the player the feeling that his actions matter. They would give the player the illusion that he has an impact on this little virtual world he has entered for the time he decides to put on the HMD. And this is important. This would make the experience far more enjoyable without changing up the gameplay itself. This section is mainly related to the campaign part of the game, where it is most apparent. The world feels awfully static and gamey. You can interact only with certain parts of the environment, which are clearly indicated to the player. So you stumble across playgrounds and balls and bikes and all of that, and you can't interact with any of it. A part of what makes VR gaming so great is a new level of interactivity, a level that flat gaming just cannot provide. I've come to be so used to being able to touch and pick up everything in VR games that I was just left thoroughly disappointed. Don't put a ball in my way and don't allow me to pick it up. This is cruelty. I know this is a game about stabbing zombies, not about picking up balls, and the stabbing zombie part works good enough, so this feels like a minor point of complaint. There is however a reason for me to bring it up. The reason is a word that is very readily used in gaming in general, but in the VR context specifically, and that word is immersion. Why do we pick up a VR game? Why do we decide to play a zombie survival game in VR? There are a ton of flat titles in that genre. Let's face it, the main reason we jump into games at all is escapism. And I mean that in an absolutely positive way. A major part of the gaming community today has boring daytime jobs where you do the same shit day in, day out. Getting a break from the everyday monotony is important. It is vital. It is healthy. It does not matter if you watch a TV show or read a book or play a board game or indulge in the fine art of drinking. All these activities offer some sort of escape from everyday life. Gaming just does it a bit more effective because it draws you in a little bit deeper. And VR gaming is the most effective means of escape currently available in the consumer electronic market. So immersion is key, for VR games specifically, except maybe for rhythm and fitness games, they obviously have a different appeal. When a game promises to spirit me away into a zombie apocalypse, I do expect an immersive experience. And a game is immersive when it draws you in. When it lets you forget about the real world, when it offers you the best possible means of escape. These little things, like the ability to pick up a ball, make the game more immersive, and though it has no impact on the core gameplay loop, it has a huge impact on the overall experience the game offers. The game is available on Steam, PSVR and Oculus Store for about $25. It is not available for the Quest, though it feels that it should be. It took a bit more than 7 hours to complete the whole thing. There's no replayability value, so that is the mileage that you can expect. Visually, well, you see the footage. I am personally mainly interested in visual design, aesthetics and atmosphere. With some exceptions, the game looks rather bland and uninteresting in my eyes. In most parts, the action is underlined with atmospheric soundscapes that in certain situations increase in intensity. There are several movement options. I personally prefer smooth movement. If you have trouble with motion sickness in VR, they have also options available to alleviate that. The controls are not rebindable in game and seemed a bit off to me at some points. For example, you can only pick up stuff with your offhand by pressing the trigger. Weapons will get transported automatically to your main hand. The grip force sensor of the index controllers are not used at all, which is a bummer. You can't stow or drop your weapons, except when you pick up a different one. You change weapons with a weapon wheel, which works fine. If you are on the fence because you don't like horror games, don't worry. This game really is more comical than scary, because of goofy animations and situations. On the flip side, if you are looking for a horror game, look elsewhere. There are many parts of the game that feel reined in, either by design or by lack of resources. The things I would change if I could are: replace the Fortnite wall with a rendered horde that you could fight off for a bit until they overwhelm you. Different scavenging locations would be invisibly discernible locations of the city. Make the character choice meaningful by giving the characters different attribute or skill set. Add enemy variety. Change the melee cooldown to a melee resistance. At least finish the story. Populate Alexandria with the people you rescue and make the town explorable. Make the game world more interactable and thus more immersive. These changes would bring the game closer to Saints and Sinners in content and quality. It might have been a deliberate decision not to do that. As an alternative, I would have committed more to the arcadiness and goofiness. It feels like the game lacks the defining identity, which might have led people to being overly critical because they just had different expectations. I myself was very critical of this game because, in my opinion, it is not a good game. However, we should really put that into perspective. The game is relatively bug-free except some minor issues with hit detections and attack animations. The combat works fine, the gameplay loop is clearly defined. Sure, it is short and lacks identity, but it is a completely functional product at a somewhat reasonable price point. Parts of the game are fun, and you might actually enjoy it if you keep your expectations in check. I can't shake the feeling that this game was created by a talented team that was forced to work on a project that they did not enjoy and just wanted to be done with as fast as possible so that they can move on to a project that they can be genuinely passionate about. At least I like to think that is what happened. We will have to wait and see how the next release will turn out. Thanks for watching.